Hey there everybody, Joe here. Thanks for tuning in again. I'm just now hitting the studio. I barely got here. That's why I'm wearing this hat. You know, I get up in the morning and my hair is pretty bad, so I just found me a good hat. This is what I found doing the iridescence. This is what makes it work. I was looking at the color swirl on the surface of a soap bubble, then looking at pictures of water in oily parking lots. You know, you see the puddle, and then as an oily surface forms the colors on the top, you always seem to get a rainbow of colors. So that's why I did that, just to enhance the effect and to test. You know, if I test my theory about what makes a look in all of the different colors, then I feel like it's a more thorough test to see if I've really got the pattern of colors rather than just a color that works. What seems to accomplish the look is that it is a colored metallic, essentially. Metallic has a really unique property, and it's not common for us to see metallic in colors other than maybe gold or silver. You know, we're not really accustomed to seeing a green or a pink or a violet metallic, and so it looks like iridescent things when we see that look of metallic. Now maybe you're not convinced that it's just metallic. Okay, fine, but this is what I did to accomplish this. You can look at my video on how to paint metallic objects, where I'm painting some Christmas bulbs on a simple tree, to show the pattern of colors used in metallics. But the short explanation is that it's high contrast because it's very similar to a mirror, where it's reflecting close to the full values of light and dark in the objects around. So whether it's a shadow or a light, like a mirror, it reflects those things. So with a mirror, both shadows and lights are close to their original darkness and close to their original color. With a piece of plastic, that is not the case. So if I find a reflective piece of plastic like this thing over here, you see a piece of plastic like this, you can see is definitely reflective as I move it around, and you see my box light reflecting off of it there. Yet we don't see images. We don't see a whole lot of colors either. You see red and light red. You know, if I painted this, I would do a red base and just use white to do the less saturated reflection areas. It's not the most complicated thing ever. And so this is very different than a metallic. This has the shiny reflective surface, yet does not have the variation of color that is in metal. So, you know, I could take this scraper blade. It reflects the colors of my fingers close to the original color. And likewise, I could put it on this picture and you would see, you know, different parts of this picture as I move it around. Metallic has a unique property of showing a large amount of color contrast and lightness darkness contrast within the color that the metallic substance is determined to be, and so I can just use that to make something look iridescent. This is tricky with paint because paint naturally desaturates as you add white to it, and that matters because color in the natural world is everything that's lit up. It's the brighter things that have all of the color. And so if every time I'm adding lightness to my color, it's getting less saturated, that's going to look like paint, or it's going to look like a piece of plastic, which is very similar to paint. It's going to look like this, where all of my highlights are desaturated. So the difference between that and this is that it gets less saturated as it moves into the shadow. So I have to be very careful not to use too saturated of a midtone. The midtone would be the color that I either add white or black to in order to get light and shadow. Adding black makes it more gray. Adding white makes it more gray. Less color is all that I'm talking about. So on this one, you can still see a little bit of midtone. See this orange, how there's this strip of orange? That is exactly what makes it look like just an illuminated object. Actually, if I wanted it to look more translucent, I might want a lot of this mid-tone color in there, kind of like my skin tone demonstration. But it doesn't work with trying to achieve this iridescence. I need everything to get more colorful as it gets brighter. so that it looks like the light source is where the color is. In a metallic, the color of the light coming into the metallic takes on the color of the metallic. So if it's an orange metallic, all of the light needs to be colored with that orange. But if I desaturate it, then it doesn't make sense, because then I have all this color in the shadow, and that's just not what we see as an average in the natural world. The short explanation on how to achieve this look specifically is making sure that as it gets darker, it also gets less colorful than my bright areas. And then it never hurts to add little patches of color to make it look more reflective. You know, if I want to break it up and put, you can see in this green, I put this little dot of this orange because I want it to be reflecting this reddish colored hand right here. So I was thinking, well, if that was bouncing off there, maybe the orange of the dirt and this red violet of the hand combined hitting this area. So that's why I put that little patch, and it causes it to look more like a mirror kind of a surface reflecting multiple colors. And then in here I have this grayer color underneath where I'm thinking it's reflecting the bluish part of this arm. And so I added these other colors in after I had established the light and shadow, but it was still important that I didn't have a consistent pattern of this color getting more colorful as it moves to the mid-tone, which paint naturally does. So I'm working against the natural nature of paint. So on the Pearlescent Wings, what I've realized is that it is having gradients of different colors in the shadows, as well as gradients of different colors in the highlights, that cause this to look reflective. Because, you know, when I think about the many colors that are in an environment, it's taking all of those different gradients from a shadow to a light, from a color to another color, shrinking them down into a small space if it's a reflective surface. And that's what I want, is to make a very subtle, reflective surface in order to make this look like pearl. So while I'm doing that, gradients of different colors in the shadows, gradients of different colors in the highlights, I want to also be sure that I'm keeping the same pattern that I have in those colored iridescent patches on the neck of my bigger creature. I want to make sure that I have grayer colors in my shadow and less gray colors in my highlights. Now, it's hard to put color in a white. As a matter of fact, if it's white, it has no color, so it's impossible. So it has to be a non-white to have color. So that's why I'm putting the color in a halo. You know, it's a halo of color around the white. So I'm going to take an area and make it pure white. And I found that when I darkened, I put darker colors all around this, because this gives me contrast to work with. Now I can add colors. You know, you can only put so much color into a bright white wing, and I was finding that it was just too white in comparison to everything else in the picture to have any look of reflection. I couldn't make it look like it was reflecting colors and still keep it white. So I have to have enough darkness to create contrast. But I can put all these colors in here, and I found that this is working with all kinds of different colors. You know, it's not seeming to matter so much what colors I put in this mid-tone. So I'll just put these, you know, violet and green colors that commonly appear in iridescent things. And here, I've got yellow and violet, so let's put a little more green in there. And then I'll brighten it with white in the middle so that I've got a representation of a very brightly colored white. And then I just need to have enough contrast that I've got, you know, this surrounded by dark enough colors that it looks like it's glowing. So after I have these established, I'm going to go over to my shadows and start putting those in. Now I want complexity in this too, different colored gradients within the shadow. So I'll start with black, and I'll add some brown right here, and then I'll put some white, and I just want to make sure that whatever colors I put in here, they are not as colorful as what's in the highlight. right there. And then how about some yellower color up in here. Okay, so I've got gradients here. Now I'm going to make this, you know, I'm going to try to make this have more of a gradient moving into the light as well. So we've got brown, we've got this magenta color right there, put a little dot of it, and then I'll blend it together with the white. And more white still. So it is difficult, you know, if you ask me, this is difficult to create these gradients going all different directions, but it seems to be a very helpful component to making it look like reflection. I just added black to that. I want to use black because that's going to make the whole thing grayer. I don't want my shadows to look more colored than the highlight. Now you can see I've got kind of a large area, and I'm immediately, you know, I wasn't recognizing this when I first started this project, but now I'm seeing that wherever I have a large area of color, it definitely starts to look less like a reflection. So I'm just gonna diversify the color more in any area that's just looking like too big of an area of the same color. You know, that's just kind of a big block of that reddish brown color in here. So all I need to do is, you know, just choose some other color to put in there. And I feel like this might be pointing somewhere close to this blue-bodied critter, so I'll put the blue in there. And then I'll lighten it. It's going to darken when it dries, so I'll go a little bit lighter. And then I'll create a gradient to this brown, which will be convenient for desaturating the color because they're very opposite, blue and brown. Now this looks a lot more reflective as it's got all these different gradients happening and still following the rule of the shadows being less saturated. I don't know, this one's pushing the limit, so I'm gonna desaturate that one a little bit more. But those are my rules. Gradients within the shadow, gradients within the highlight, saturation in the midtone, but not in the shadow. You can accidentally follow this rule of shifting hues that I've identified in previous projects, but if I go yellow, red, violet, then I'm creating the look of an object that has light shining from within. So sometimes I'll go backwards just to purposely avoid that. You can see down here it goes green, red, yellow to the shadow, which is not that order, and so it helps this to look like it's definitely not translucent and so is more easily interpreted as reflection. But I don't feel like a lot of thought has to go into that because paint doesn't just automatically achieve that look. That look is hard enough on its own to achieve, but I have noticed, maybe just because I'm so accustomed to doing that on everything, there's been a couple times when I, like down there, where I purposely undid it. So here I'm just trying to make this less saturated. So black and brown, some other colors that aren't in there, and then maybe a little bit of white on this very top edge. I don't know. Everything I want to just end on a gradient. Now this is kind of an abrupt change right here, but you know, it's okay. Maybe there's a fold in the wing or something. If I have the overall look, I'm gonna settle for it. I'm gonna put a little bit more of this. I like that blue on the end. I'm gonna expand that area out a little bit. This is finally starting to feel a little bit fun. The last couple days working on this iridescence study has been quite a headache. But you know, it's funny how, you know, there's such enjoyment in pushing yourself to your limits. Nice gray shadow there, I like that. And now I'll put a little bit of unexpected color in the, I'm going to call it the colorful zone, the area between the pure white and the shadow. I wouldn't call this a midtone, you know, because it is the area where a midtone would be, but I'm not, I guess you could work from it. Maybe I will call it a midtone. It's just a diversified midtone. I have to make it many colors. Just put a little bit of this magenta in there. I think it would look good to have the yellow in between the magenta and the greens. The contrast looks good. You know, I was looking, you can look at pictures of pearls online, just do a image search, you know. And it's very common to have the pearl on a light colored background because you see a lot of reflection that way. The light colored background allows you to see the contrast in the pearl. But when I had the opposite, I have all this color in the background and then just a white wing at the beginning, and that was really a hang up for me. Not being able to represent color within that white because all of this color was overpowering it. And then I didn't have all these gradients in place too. I need some pure white in here. That's when it really looks like a nice reflection, is when it, works its way into the brightest area, is where you put the pure white to look like a little twinkly highlight. It's not that it can't be done with more of the white, I just feel like it looks more reflective if I reserve the most pure white for that middle spot. And that's another thing I was unable to do when I had so much white all over the wing. Alright, well, I'm looking at comments on last week's video. Thank you very much, Isabella, for the nice compliment. Rut says, "You are a great artist, my dear Joe. I'm always amazed at how you get values right. They look so natural. I want to be able to understand perfectly well exactly what you mean in your explanations. Going back over my videos is valuable. I hate to just point you in another direction and say just go watch the videos, but I really tried to explain things in just such a way that if you were rewatching it, that it would be reliable information. I think you have natural talent, a real gift from the Almighty God." Thank you very much for the very nice compliment. I think that excitement causes you to retain information, and the retaining information is what accumulates into what people call talent. I don't know. Perhaps it is just a mysterious gift from God, that you either get or don't get. I'm not convinced that you have to be born with it. Sam Gardner says, "I love this. I think you're one of the most realistic artists I've ever seen." Wow, thank you. I've never seen someone that thinks of it the way you do. I'm having a really hard time just straight up enjoying art and painting. I feel like I'm starting to look at it as just rules. Well, I'm sure that I'm no help in that regard. All I ever do is point out the rules that I use in order to paint, but I hope that I'm not a source of discouragement for you. How can I start enjoying it again? How can I feel free in painting again? Because that was why I loved it, and I just feel like it's going away now. Just because I have observed rules that help me to create my work doesn't mean that they're important. Doesn't mean that you ought to follow them. It's just tools, tools that whoever wants can pick them up and use them. It's there, it's identified, it's helpful information for anybody that's trying to go to that direction. But I recommend having a bigger reason than the art itself for doing art. For me, it was identifying answers to difficult questions. I remember what it was like to start out painting, trying to figure out everything, and talking to artists that didn't really want to share a lot, or asking experts that didn't have a lot of answers, and being so frustrated. And answers are just such a nice thing to have that I just really felt awesome about being able to go find answers and offer them to people who are in the same place that I was in. That gives me great satisfaction. I feel like I'm helping. And so I find a lot of joy in doing that because I feel like I'm being helpful. It's not because of the end product, the painting. That wasn't enough for me. Having a reason that's about the people and not the thing is key. "Can you paint a cabin?" says Roga. Bob Ross cabins. Let's not disrespect Bob Ross. I absolutely loved waking up on Saturday mornings and watching his shows. He is exactly what I'm talking about. The previous comment about enjoying painting. I mean, his show was the joy of painting. He showed that there was greater value in the joy of painting than making sure that your cabin is the best cabin. If you're wanting to paint a cabin that looks more realistic, I respect that, and I will do my best in the future to do a video on how to do that. Jordan says, "You seem to notice a lot of details that others don't. Is this the result of being a painter, or did you notice these things before?" When I was 3 years old, I drew this little turtle, and my mom and dad said, "Wow, that's a recognizable drawing." He's only 3, they saved it, and I still have it. I had a love for shapes, and I would look at the wallpaper patterns like many of us do, and see all kinds of shapes. But I think where maybe my perception is unique is that just a basic shape would have a feeling to me that I really liked, and it would be just a basic shape, and I would say to myself, I want to use that in a drawing, and my visual memory just really clinged to shape. And then color understanding came later in my adult life. As I was wanting to make a living as a painter, I began to appreciate color with the same excitement that I appreciated shapes from a very young age. But the understanding of color didn't come until I was like 25 years old trying to be a muralist. Prospero says, reminds me of the work of Roger Dean of Yes album cover game. Good work. I'll have to look at Roger Dean and see. Kathy Jenkins says, I often use Procreate or some other painting tool like PixArt. You know what? I really like that app, Procreate. I used to use it all the time to do renderings. I still have saved files of renderings I would do and then email to somebody. Great app for experimenting with color, just like you said. I take a photo of my painting and work out different options on my iPad. This way I can see how my painting will do with different colors, shapes, added subjects, glazes, etc. That way I don't have to repaint as much. It is helpful. Yes, definitely, I agree. I accidentally threw my iPad in a recycle dumpster, so I don't do that anymore. I want to give a quick mention to a couple of videos that I used right here on YouTube. The channel is Amelia, and you can see that she's mixing looks like the CMYK printing color system. I was fascinated by this as I was searching iridescence. You can look up the video. I'll put the link down there. Cyan, magenta, and yellow is the names in printing. I don't know specifically what to call them if they're in paint pigments, but nevertheless, it's like this magenta color, a gold, and a turquoise, and mixing those together you get the intermediate colors that they make, and you get a whole rainbow, and it makes the look of you know, like the oil and water rainbows that you see. And so I thought that was cool, and it was really helpful for me to understand that what we're looking at is the same effects of metallics, because those were metallic paints. And then another video by Gleb Alexandrov is a demonstration of the effect that the roughness setting on the program Blender has. And I was looking at that and just fascinated again at the similarity of recognizing the difference that it makes in my painting. I'm considering the same things, the roughness of the texture. This is a metallic, yet you don't see a mirror image in it because it has a roughness to it. Yet the color relationships are the same, so it's valuable to recognize that we have a lot of different looks available by changing the roughness of something. But I just don't use those terms. But it was a good reference video, so thanks, Gleb, for putting that up. I want to remind you to subscribe so that I can show off for you again next week. Also, you can go to my site and see the videos that I have for sale there. Things that I especially found challenging are the things that I've focused on making how-to videos about. So if you're serious about figuring out how to achieve the effect of fill in the blank, clouds, water, dirt, grass, hills, those are the things I make videos about, and I always appreciate the support if you go and look at what I have for sale. Also, we love to put up the work that you guys are doing out there. It makes me feel like my videos are a lot more important when they include your work. So post what you're doing at Mural Joe, and we'll be scouting for those. So thank you again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Okay, I'm thinking something nice and big.